The exams and the assignments are here with me until 5:30 or maybe 5:15. I'm going to do the lecture because I would like to start imperialism today. And this week we're going to finish imperialism. We will try to finish imperialism. If not, on Monday, next Monday, we will finish imperialism and we'll talk a little bit about how the international regimes affect the system today and how it was in the past. So that's kind of how we're going to be wrapping up the whole semester, okay? So around 5:15, 5:30, I'm going to give your exams to you and we will go over the exams. And then I will talk about what I was expecting and how I did the grading of the exams. And then I will also give you your assignments, and we will go over the assignments as well. Okay? If you have any questions about the exams and the assignments, please wait until I give you these back. The current, okay, the second assignment. Let's just do that by the end of the class as well. Okay, let's just hold on to our concentration now, and then we'll do it afterwards. Okay? All right. So I'm actually going to continue with problems of nationalism. But first, I know that you had a weekend where you thought about what patriotism is and what the difference between patriotism and nationalism is. All weekend long, you've been thinking about it. Now is the time to actually discuss it. So what is patriotism? I'm not asking the Turkish translation of patriotism. Thank you, I know that. Yes.
The love for the country. And countrymen.
Okay, actually, you know what? This is, you know, in very simple, non-academic terms, love for your country. Okay, and your fellow countrymen. Mehmet, did you? Oh, sorry, yeah.
Patriotism pertains to.
You have notes on patriotism. Okay.
Love for a nation. With more emphasis on the values and beliefs, and also is a feeling of admiration for a way of life of a nation, and it's based on simply affection and peace, in contrast to nationalism. Okay. Are you saying that nationalism is a little bit more rational compared to? Okay. It's more planned and organized compared to patriotism? Okay. Do you remember that on Thursday I told you that nationalism is an ideology, but patriotism is not? Remember? That is the biggest difference. I actually gave you the answer, so you didn't have to die for the answer in the weekend. I gave you the answer. An ideology is an organized idea, right? It's organized so that many people will subscribe to it. But in terms of patriotism, we can't really talk about an ideology when we talk about patriotism. And in patriotism, you have a more passionate situation, right? How about the effect of patriotism on nationalism? Do you think there's any relationship between patriotism and nationalism? Ceyda?
I think patriotism is an element of nationalism.
It's an element? Okay. Is it like a subcomponent of nationalism? Why would you say that?
Well, as you said, that feeling, patriotism, I see more as a feeling, and that's linked to nationalism.
Okay.
Nationalism is more comprehensive.
So are you saying I need to first create that feeling in you, that love, in your words, that love, that passionate feeling, so that I can actually successfully implement nationalism in you? Okay, on you? Okay, not in, on you. Okay. So who wouldn't agree that patriotism and nationalism are connected? They're connected. So everybody agrees that they're connected. Okay. Is there anyone who would say, I'm very patriotic?
Used to be.
In what condition?
Depends on the circumstance.
Oh, it depends on the circumstances of what?
Yeah, for instance, since we are dealing with this terrorism issue.
Mm-hmm.
In the terrorism, I'm a patriotic guy.
Okay, when it comes to terrorism issues, you're patriotic.
Yes.
Okay. When it comes to what you're not patriotic? Let me ask the what?
Economy.
Economy. Okay. Why do you say that? Turkey is one of the biggest economies in the world, actually, at the moment. I mean, according to global statistics, it looks like it. What else?
Yeah, when I graduate, I won't earn $3,500 per year.
Mm-hmm. You think you won't?
Per year or per month?
Okay.
Per month, you mean? Yeah. Per month. Per month. Okay. Okay. We're on camera. Don't say these things. People will think that BCAD graduates cannot earn money, which is not true. No. Okay, so you are actually, you think that it's conditional. Being patriotic is conditional. Gökhan.
I'm patriotic because you can think your country like a ship. If you lose your ship, you can lose your everything.
Okay, so that kind of opinion then,
You have to love your country.
okay,
Always.
from that perspective, okay, now we're coming to when love becomes conditional. So in your case, your love is conditional. So you're not saying in you know, good times and bad times. You're actually saying, you know, I'm really patriotic when it comes to security issues, but in terms of economy, I don't think the country is doing well, so I'm not very patriotic when it comes to that.
In my opinion, it does not depend on conditions.
Okay, so you are saying that I die for my love. Your love is unconditional in that sense. So we have differences in opinion, which is actually possible. That's what patriotism is about. Patriotism has degrees. It's true, okay? And in the case of nationalism, when you are, we told you, I actually told you that nationalism, when it is used and to manipulate people in great extents, it may become hyper-nationalism. And the issue of patriotism becomes important in hyper-nationalist societies, because then you start executing people, well, figuratively executing people that you think are not patriotic enough, okay? So the problem with nationalism is when it becomes extreme nationalism, you start discriminating between your own people, and you start blaming people for not being patriotic enough. Okay? So hyper-nationalism actually has a huge emphasis on who's the real patriot, who's the one that loves his country the most. So you start looking at those degrees of patriotism, and you start pointing fingers, and you start blaming people. That actually makes nationalism, when you come to that point of hyper-nationalism, that makes this ideology very destructive, okay? So nationalism, Gellner said, is natural. It's a natural consequence of industrialization. So states actually use this ideology as a glue to hold the society together. But when you have nationalism in extreme levels, you actually start thinking that people have to love their country as much as you do, and when they don't, you start thinking they deserve to die or they deserve to be punished, okay? So extreme nationalism then will be problematic. We've already talked about how it is problematic for empires, because there are different groups within empires, and as a result of hyper-nationalism or even moderate nationalism levels, these different groups will want to form their own states. So empires will eventually collapse as a result of nationalism. And then we said, you know, nationalism might be a problem for minority groups, but we didn't really get into this, okay? And I'm going to connect it to patriotism. Usually, minorities in a country will be considered less patriotic, okay? Which actually increases the nationalist feelings of the minority, which in some instances, in some cases, might lead to secessionist movements, okay? Secession means you want to separate, as a group, you want to separate from the state and own your, and form your own state, okay? So this whole pressure of who loves the country more, kind of extreme patriotism that blames others for not loving the country as much as you do, can actually be destructive for how the state treats minorities, okay? So minorities can actually experience issues. As a result, they might create their own nationalisms. And these nationalisms might lead to secessionist movements, okay? Secessionist movements are basically, again, a huge problem for empires, but they are also huge problems for states, nation states, okay? So we've said in this course here and then that nation states are built assuming that there's one nation, putting together or pointing to the commonalities in that one nation. So ignoring the differences and looking at, focusing on the similarities, okay? So being one nation was a utopia, but it was the whole idea behind states' establishment and use manipulation of nationalism. We also said that there will be problems for ethnic nationals abroad. I already told you that these are diasporas, right? The diaspora actually live outside their countries. So if you go to another state from your home country, and if you start living there, you become a diaspora. And the diasporas, if there is hyper-nationalism in that state, then that will be a problem. And when the diaspora wants to actually get that state that they live under controlled by their home state, that's another problem, okay? That's actually the opposite of secessionism. Another thing about nationalism, when can nationalism become a problem? Well, it's a matter of timing. So when does nationalism cause a problem? Well, creation of a state before emergence of nation is a problematic thing. So if you don't actually have a nation, and you already have a state, that is quite a problem. Can you think of an example? You already created a state, but you don't really have a nation yet. Yugoslavia might be considered as an example, right? You have a state, but in that state you have many different groups, and they don't really consider themselves as a nation, one nation. There are many different ethnic groups, and they're quite different in terms of their language, religion, history, and all. So you have a problem when you have created a state, but you don't really have a nation. Another good example is something that I was actually talking about in my war class, another state, today. Okay. You actually presented it, Orkun, right? Okay. So Afghanistan is a buffer state. We already mentioned this, right? So Afghanistan was built actually as a buffer state, and the borders were pretty much built because, you know, there was this attempt to stop the Russian Empire from having anything to do with India, which was a British colony, right? So when you have, you know, the borders ready, but the nation is not there yet, it's a problem. I heard someone saying Somalia. Okay. Just Africa in general. Most African states, right? When you have, you know, the state, but you have, well, actually, Cyprus will be just the opposite. I'll get to it. So you have the creation of the state before you actually have a group of people that say we are a nation. That is a problem, okay? And sooner or later you have problems, the case of Somalia, piracy, and Somaliland is a de facto state now, wants to separate from the country. So nationalism in that sense becomes destructive. Or Rwanda, there was the Hutu nationalism versus Tutsi nationalism, which is a problem, okay? So that kind of a situation would be problematic. The second timing issue is when you have a creation of a state after emergence of nations. So you already have a nation, but that nation does not have a territory to build a state. You gave the example of Northern Cyprus. So that's one example. You can give the example, well, Palestine is a complicated example. Well, in the case of Palestine, there is a land. There was a land. But then the land was lost, and then there was the struggle again to establish a Palestine with the old borders. So the case of Palestine is complicated, but I think Cyprus is a good example in that sense. You know, very few countries recognize Cyprus as a state.
TRNC, not
Yeah.
Cyprus as well.
So, well, actually, I should say Northern Cyprus. Cyprus is something else, right? So, Northern Cyprus is not really accepted as a separate state. In that sense, that has created the nationalism. Northern Cyprus Turkish nationalism was a huge problem. But at the same time, the Southern Cyprus nationalism was also a problem. And that's why these two nationalisms clashed in the island of Cyprus, and we came to the situation that we're experiencing today. There's no solution so far to the conflict. Another example in the case of Iraq is the Kurds, right? Actually, in general, the Kurds, because the Kurds claim to be a nation without a state, and so with that claim you have a growing nationalism, and that kind of nationalism might end up in creation of a nation state, or autonomy, and that's the situation in Iraq, right? There is a regional autonomy, there's a de facto state in the Kurdistan regional government in the northern part of Iraq. So you might actually end up having your own state, or you might actually struggle to have your own state but not achieve to have your state, or you can have autonomy. So they're all different types of nationalisms leading to different types of solutions or non-solutions. Okay, guys? So depending on when you have a nation and when you have a state, you might actually have nationalism as a problem. Why am I emphasizing nationalism as a possible problem? Because Gallner has told us that nationalism is not a problem. Normally, nationalism is just a natural process, according to him. Okay? So according to him, it should not be a problem. But it becomes a problem depending on the situation, these conditions that we have just talked about. Okay? So the consequence of nationalism has often been war. Why? One more time, why are wars important? Why do we keep coming back to war in this course? Wars shape the international system. Wars shape the states. Wars shape the rise of international organizations. You know, because you have wars, you decide to have international organizations, such as the United Nations. Wars shape economy as well. So wars are quite important in the international system. That's why every time I come back to war. So in terms of the three ideologies, social Darwinism, militarism, and the cult of the offensive, there was no question that these three would lead to war. They were actually ideologies that slowly or fastly led to war. In the case of nationalism, nationalism is supposed to be a natural thing. It's supposed to be something that happens as a result of industrialization. If that is so, nationalism does not have to lead to war, okay? And it doesn't always lead to war. Sometimes it does. That's why I showed you the last slide, okay? Those were the conditions when nationalism can lead to war. So the 30 Years' War that we have talked about in the beginning of the semester led to the creation of Westphalian system, guys. Westphalian system was about sovereignty, okay? Westphalian system is not when the nation state was established, but Westphalian system is when the treaty is when the norm of sovereignty was established, okay? We had nation states, remember, evolving, remember from Sprout? Nation state slowly evolves. But by 1648, you have the norm of sovereignty. That means if you don't want to fight, you are going to actually accept the borders of another state and that other state can do whatever they want in their own borders. Okay? That's what Westphalia was based on, the norm of sovereignty. So after that, with the French Revolution, we have seen that in time, countries learned that you need larger and larger armies because of the weapons technology, and that required conscription. Okay? So I'm coming to my usual argument. Would you die for me just for nothing? No. If you become nihilists, if I can manipulate you with the nationalist ideology, you would die for me willingly. Okay? Otherwise, no one will want to die for me. So, in the case of nationalism, if I can get you around the flag, if I can get the rally around the flag effect, and if I can, yes, if I can make everyone a nihilist, then I can actually face the external threats better, and I can win wars. Why do I want to win wars? Because winning wars is about your existence. Okay? If you lose wars, we don't really hear about those who lose wars. We have talked about this, right? The history really talks about the winners. You know, we don't really talk about the losers much. As a result, you want to win the war, whatever war we're talking about. So nationalism, in that sense, becomes something that is something that becomes really useful. Okay? So I will get you to die for me using an ideology like nationalism. And if I do it enough, like Hitler did, like Milosevic did, if I can get you extremist nihilists, you will get outside, and the moment you hear anything against me, against your leader, exactly. So you're going to become violent at that point. Okay? So nationalism then, not necessarily, but sometimes when it is manipulated a lot, causes wars. And in the case of Hitler, Hitler actually was a great manipulator. Okay? He was a great manipulator because he used so many different ideologies together. And at times, you know, he used nationalism. At times, he used social Darwinism, so and militarism. So he actually switched between ideologies. These ideologies that, when they become extreme, they cause trouble. Okay, so nationalism, in that sense, is used to increase the security dilemma. What is the security dilemma from realist perspective?
One country become more powerful with militarily and technologically, its neighbors think that they become threat for them. So
Okay.
they began to rise their power.
Okay.
Whether the second party will defect or not.
All right. Let me ask you something. What is this?
Razor.
Okay.
A weapon.
You said a weapon. Why would you say that?
If you throw it.
Okay. Now, usually, with this, you don't really think that I can hurt you, right? I'm the professor and I have this. I should, the first thing that you can consider is I'm going to actually use it in the usual way. But if you one day see me throwing this on Dorg's face, the next day you're going to start thinking that I can actually use this as a weapon. So the more I have stuff that I can use as weapons, the more nervous you're going to become, right? In the past, well, we are on camera in this course, so I'm not going to do it. But in the past, I would show this with a board marker, I would actually throw it on the board marker, on the student, which is not a nice thing to do, I accept. But I would actually pick, somewhere that doesn't hurt. And I wouldn't throw it very fast. So let me tell you what would happen. The next course the student takes with me, if the student actually chooses to take another course with me, the next course that he takes with me, he actually, the moment he sees the board marker in my hand, he starts thinking, I might actually shoot at him again, okay? I create this feeling that the board marker is a threat, okay? So usually, something like being more powerful may not actually be perceived as a threat. So if you see me really big, okay, in the beginning of the semester, I start working out, okay? And every day you see me bigger and bigger. You shouldn't be necessarily thinking, she's becoming a threat. But you should be thinking, oh, she's becoming more and more powerful. Well, actually, in the case of security dilemma, as a state becomes more and more powerful, you're actually starting to feel more nervous, and you think that that power is going to turn into a threat sooner or later, okay? So you want to balance against that power or against that threat that you're perceiving. In the case of my getting bigger, it might just mean that I have a hormonal disorder and I'm getting, I'm gaining weight. And it has nothing to threat you. But on the other hand, there's this suspicion that one day I can beat you up if I get bigger and bigger. Okay? Do you see how actually states might be perceiving this? And after a while, you can actually consider it as, you come to a point that you feel like you need to be ready at all times. That's when you start thinking the international relations game is a zero-sum game. When I get stronger, the others should not, becomes the logic of it, okay? I'm actually explaining elements of realism to you, realist international relations to you, okay, in general. So nationalism starts making you feel that, you might actually, as a nation, you might be under risk. So with hyper-nationalism, any small act that a group in the country makes will become a threat or will be perceived as a threat, okay? The moment, let's just say that I lose my balance for a moment and I do this, and that actually becomes perceived as a threat, and you go like this. So it's not really what the threat is, but at that point it's what you perceive, okay? And nationalism as an ideology can enhance your perception of threat. That's when nationalism becomes destructive. Okay? When you start becoming more and more paranoid. So Gallner says, well, nationalism is neither evil nor avoidable, which means it's going to happen. Okay? If you nationalize, sooner or later, nationalism is going to be an ideology that will be used by the state. Okay? Do you remember the Hobsbawm argument? The elite manipulation argument? Hobsbawm, on the other hand, will say nationalism is not the natural consequence of industrialization. It's actually a state elite's manipulation tool for their own, especially for their own benefit, and also for the continuation of the state. So in that sense, if you want war, you can actually manipulate nationalism. In my war course, I show the moment Milosevic actually goes, really decides to use nationalism. That moment, we will show it next week, right? Okay, so we will show it next week in our class. But if you go to YouTube and if you Google Milosevic and nationalism, you will find the video. In that video, he actually has this expression, this old, was it an old guy comes to him and says, well, they're beating us up. They are, torturing us. They're beating us up. Aren't you going to help us? Your communist ideology doesn't help us. So that's what the guy says. And for that, that moment, Milosevic, kind of freezes for a moment. And then he turns and he says, you will never be beaten up again. That's it, It's on record, actually. After that moment, he starts with Serbian nationalist discourse. Before that, he calls everyone comrades, and he's basically implementing Tito's communist strategy. But after that moment, he actually starts using the nationalist discourse, and he starts saying that the Albanians in Kosovo should be dealt with, for the Serbs not to be beaten up again. So nationalism then, according to Hobsbawm, can be manipulated like this. Okay, so that's how war and nationalism can be considered together. Not necessarily, but at times they can. Okay, there are many examples of it, and Yugoslavia is a great example of it. Any questions about nationalism, patriotism, these issues that we've talked about? Now, in the exam, what would I ask you about this topic? I would be asking you, first of all, you should know what a nation is, obviously, what nationalism is, and you should definitely be able to at least give me 2 different explanations of how nationalism came to being, how nationalism can be explained theoretically, okay? And then you should be able to give me at least 1 or 2 case examples of how nationalism led to war, or how nationalism led to peace, okay? So every time you're studying anything related to this course, I want you to think of it first from a theoretical perspective. What's the causal mechanism, the causal connections in this argument, okay? The second thing that you should do is, after you're able to explain the causal mechanism, you should be able to give an example to me, okay? A case example. You don't have to be an expert on that case, but you should be able to give the example, okay? Gellner actually in the reading does that. He gets into what a pre-industrial society looks like, and he gives examples, and then he also gives examples of an industrial society, okay? So I don't really want you to memorize these examples from the readings, but I want you to catch a few of them and make sure that you can connect that example to the theory, okay, to the explanation. That's what really matters here, okay? Questions? Comments? What time is it? Should I go to my imperialism discussion? Okay. Back to our yin-yang, our Pokemon picture. I never watched Pokemon. I'm too old. I'm too old for Pokemon, you know. Okay. What was the idea of Pokemon?
No idea.
There's no.
Gata Keçamon.
Okay. So this is really more. It's more suitable to call it a yin-yang picture then, right?
Pokemon imperialism.
Okay. I don't know how to connect Pokemon to imperialism. Okay. Oh, okay. That's how you. Okay. This is where I'm going to start from then. Video games, huh? Video games and imperialism. Okay. We can start the discussion from there, actually. Guys, this is our figure where we said this is basically what. There's nothing in reality that we can call the system, right? The system is an imagined entity. We're not actually pointing to something that we can touch. But the system actually is connected through political and economic relations. Of whom? Of the state. Okay? That's basically what we are doing in this course. Since the beginning of the semester. We're looking at how did the state, well, states, more than one state, how do states actually affect each other politically and economically? How did a state develop economically and politically? Well, we said that states within this imagined system affect each other's behaviors. And also, whatever the system, this imagined system looks like, might be affecting the state. That's the main actor. And then we also said that the main actor may no longer be the nation state. But nation state has been the main actor for a very long time now. We started talking about the international system or the modern international system from 1500s on. I keep going back to 1500s, right? And then I keep emphasizing Westphalia, 1600s. So from 1500s on, we have the nation state and the modern system that we have been emphasizing in this course. And we've been looking at economic development, state building, and how military revolution, how the technology affected the nation state. Okay? This is it. I'm actually telling you what the big picture of the course is. Now, having said that, we talked about war, we talked about state building, we talked about how the states have to tax. They need to extract resources. They do to survive, we said. And then we talked about how these different ideologies might be leading to war. Well, on top of that, I'm going to tell you that there is one more ideology that we're going to get into, which is imperialism, which affected the whole imagined system because it affected individual states, and it actually led to us to today's system where we have some countries stronger or more powerful or weaker, or some countries richer, some countries poorer. So this whole, actually, whatever you see today is very much affected to imperialism as well, okay? Because from 1500s on, haven't I told you that with the nicer ships, remember the Portuguese caravel? When you have nicer ships, yeah, you're able to actually go out and you're able to find new places, discover new places. And when you discover new places, usually you're the one with a better technology, especially a better military technology. And you go with your technology, you either conquer those places or you make colonies in those places. And you actually affect the governments and the civilizations in those places. And as a result, you have imperialism as an ideology in the world that affected how the world looks like today. Okay? That's why I wanted to look at imperialism in the end of the semester. Because you keep saying, well, this state is more powerful, or this state is less powerful. Well, it all actually adds up by looking at imperialism, the ideology of, or both an ideology and a phenomenon of imperialism, okay? So if I say imperialism, you would immediately think of it as an ideology. If I say colonization, you can think of a phenomenon that took place, right? So imperialism has it both. Okay, guys? What is imperialism? Well, first of all, what's an empire? You read about empires in Sprout. Think about it again. What's an empire?
There are lots of different nations
Okay.
on this territory,
Speak up.
and also
You have different nations in a territory, you said. Radon.
It has an expansionist policy.
Okay. An empire has an expansionist policy, you said. So empires are, can I just say that empires are big? Hold on, what happened? I couldn't go back to my imperialism, sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay. So there's the idea of expansion, you said. Well, if there's the idea of expansion, which means, that means the territory is large. So the territory that you're talking about is large. It is large as a result, you have many different nations in that territory. Okay? All of these we're putting together. Well, empires actually, in the past, had formal colonies. So when you go to a place far away from the motherland, you actually need to establish a colony. What's a colony?
a puppet overseas market territory. That's you.
Puppet territory. Okay. A puppet person would make sense. A puppet territory may not.
Satellite.
So you mean a satellite maybe? Okay. With a puppet government? Puppet government. You have the puppet there. Okay. With a puppet government. Okay. So what is a colony for?
Economic extraction of resources.
You think about it. Let's take a break and we'll come back.